So I'm the CEO of Monument Therapeutics. We are bringing precision medicine to neuroscience, starting with schizophrenia. And our lead drug is currently in a phase 2 trial, which is sometimes making jokes about large and dilutive funding. I've been working in schizophrenia since 2022. I started my PhD in Cambridge, and I almost always start presentations by telling people about the disease of schizophrenia, which has been wildly stigmatized and underinvested in. In the last 18 months, that's really changed because there have been some absolutely enormous M&As and a couple of NASDAQ IPOs last autumn driven by schizophrenia assets. So from an area that's been very difficult scientifically and relatively uninvestable, we've seen these enormous deals based almost entirely on schizophrenia drugs. Schizophrenia, if you're not familiar, it affects about 1% of the population. You get diagnosed with schizophrenia because you have either hallucinations, of which the most common is hearing voices, and or delusions, of which the most common is being paranoid. We call these positive symptoms, psychotic symptoms, and there's many drugs available to treat them, but they come with a lot of side effects. Cobenfy, which was the driver for the 14 billion acquisition of Karuna by BMS, is a new drug just come to market, currently with a list price of about $22,000 a year in the US, that also treats these positive symptoms, but does so with a different side effect profile, thought to be much more tolerable. So clearly there is a lot of opportunity to invest in and make money in schizophrenia. There are treatments for positive symptoms, but there are actually two other aspects of schizophrenia, two different indications in the FDA's mind. One is negative symptoms, which is where you have low mood, low motivation, so it's a lack of normal behavior. And the other is cognitive symptoms, so major problems with concentration, memory, planning, decision-making, that is very important with respect to people's everyday function and also the economic costs of schizophrenia. Having said all that, there is a massive unmet medical need for better treatments, and patients deserve that we develop them. That's not unique to schizophrenia. That's very common across a lot of psychiatry. And the reason that there are so few good treatments in psychiatry is because historically there's been about a 95% failure rate during the clinical phases of development. So it's been very hard to develop new drugs for psychiatric indications. The reason for this is because the diagnosis we use in psychiatry are based on asking people how they feel and what they're experiencing. So they're not objective, and they also describe syndromes which should give differentiation between the different kinds of symptoms that people experience. But actually what we see is that symptoms like low mood, cognitive problems, not being able to sleep, are completely common across many different disorders. So you might have all of those symptoms, be diagnosed with depression or bipolar disorder, or schizophrenia or anxiety. And that makes it really hard to target drug development because of these very imprecise diagnostic categories that we have. So what are Monument doing differently? We are trying to do much more precise drug development in this area. We need biomarkers, and actually we can do this with digital biomarkers, meaning things that we can use a computer to measure rather than wet lab or blood-based or neuroimaging biomarkers. We are using a biomarker platform developed by Cambridge Cognition, which Monument spun out of in 2021. You can see what the platform looks like at the top. We basically use some very simple computer games that have very sophisticated algorithms behind them so that we can tell whether the processes that you're using to solve these very simple games are normal or abnormal. We're measuring brain processes, and we're doing that in a way that's non-invasive. You can measure these same processes in more invasive ways, like EEG, where you put an electrical bath cap on your head, but we like using software to do them because software is just infinitely scalable. What we use these biomarkers for is to find homogenous groups of patients who, whatever else is going on, share a common abnormality in brain processes, and then we use novel or reformulated or combination drugs to target that brain process. And the logic here is, if we only put people into a clinical trial who all have the same brain problem that our drug treats, it's more likely that all of those people will respond positively. We should be able to beat that 95% failure rate. We are doing this in our own drug development programs first, although ultimately we would like to partner. As I mentioned, we're working in our lead asset, we're working in schizophrenia, and we're targeting the cognitive symptoms. So no drugs available, very common problem in schizophrenia. Schizophrenia actually costs more than cancer annually, and much of that is driven by economic costs, so patients not being able to hold down jobs and finish college because of these cognitive symptoms, and also by them not being able to manage their complex healthcare needs. Again, a lot of that driven by problems with memory and concentration and decision making. So this is an area that pharma's been very interested in for a long time. They think it will be a blockbuster drug, but nonetheless, there have been no drugs currently approved. We use a biomarker that detects the 2 in 3 patients that would benefit from our particular drug, which is has a mechanism of action that is nicotinic agonism. It's actually a fixed dose combination of 2 old drugs. The reason for the combination is that we get better efficacy by putting the 2 drugs together. We've shown that preclinically. We also get better tolerability. So the second drug offsets a side effect caused by the first drug. And we have, because of these combination of efficacy and safety improvements, we have patents on that drug-drug combination. We also have patents on the biomarker, and we're starting to move now into new formulations and so forth. This is what Sunil referred to. Our phase 2 trial is currently in setup, just about to start. It's funded by a public-private partnership that has so far awarded actually $96 million to the clinical trial sites that are running the study. So the funding comes from the US NIH and 4 pharmaceutical companies and medical charities. It's coordinated by the Foundation for NIH, and that grant has been awarded to Yale, who runs the clinical trial sites, and also to Harvard, who are running the data management processes. Essentially, they wanted to run a study in the very early stages of schizophrenia because no one had ever tried to run a clinical trial in that population. They asked for candidates. Our drug was competitively selected from 30 candidate programs. And from our point of view, this has been brilliant because this is a major study. It's in 150 patients, 15 sites, 8 weeks, and we're not paying for it. We provided the drug and we get to use the data. So this study, which reads out at mid to late 2027, will tell us whether our drug improves cognitive symptoms and also whether our biomarker is able to predict in who the drug works for. So we're including both biomarker positive and biomarker negative individuals in this. Obviously, fantastic validation, both the selection of our drug versus 29 other candidates, and the funding mechanism, as Sunil mentioned, is non-dilutive, which has allowed us to get this far on really very little investment. We've had about 6.6 million diluted investment so far in total for the company. We are looking to raise more investment. We're heading towards a Series A that's probably in the range of 10 to 15 million. And the purpose for that is essentially to allow the same drug and the same biomarker to be tested in some other smaller clinical studies during the time frame of that rather large US trial. So that trial, which is in early schizophrenia, we'd like to test our drug in chronic schizophrenia, as that is a population that pharma companies are much more familiar with from a commercial and regulatory point of view. We also have reason to believe that the drug will work in ADHD. So again, to improve these symptoms of concentration, memory, decision-making, planning that are really, massive problems in ADHD. ADHD is really interesting because adult ADHD in particular is a very fast-growing market. A lot of people being diagnosed that weren't diagnosed as children. And it is an area where there are drugs available, but they're all basically amphetamine-based. Taking amphetamine-based drugs for a long period of time is not a great thing. We're also intending to do some reformulation work to change our drug, which is currently dosed twice daily, to once daily, to make it more tolerable for patients, to make it easier for them to adhere to the regime and to make it more commercially viable. So the goal of all of this work is essentially to allow us at the end of 2027 to do a good deal, a better deal with pharma with respect to licensing, partnering, or potentially being acquired. With respect to the team, myself and the other 2 women that you see on the slide are the co-founders. We spun Monument out of Cambridge Cognition, which is the digital biomarker company, in 2021. Our chair is Bob Rady, who is a US pharma biotech exec. And hopefully what I have brought across is that although neuroscience is very high risk, this is a very low risk form of neuroscience. We already know a lot about the drug. We already have the major study paid for through a non-dilutive mechanism. We're a very small business. We're 3.7 FTE. So we're delivering this in a very capital efficient manner. But if it works, there is this, potentially very large upside and an ability to hopefully help fulfill a major unmet medical need. Thank you very much.
First question, we've got a really powerful drug. Is that a problem?
It's not at all, actually. So there have been quite a few drugs in psychiatry now that are using this combination approach where one drug does most of the heavy lifting with respect to efficacy and the second drug is there and it's necessary from a safety point of view. The advantages of that is that it can take advantage of faster development because you already have a lot of development and the safety data from the two original drugs. What we have here is one drug that is new to at least America and the FDA plus another drug. So there's adequate patent protection and there are now precedents in terms of, so that drug, Cambridge, that I was mentioning at the start, that is also two old drugs put together. So I think the perception that we've repurposed drugs are not valuable drugs has really been overturned just in these years, actually.
Okay. Anyone else? But exactly on time. It's unbelievable. We've never been on time for ChaiTime. We've got a short break, 15 minutes. Please have a drink and network and whatever. The back as well. You can find a bathroom there.
Nice to meet you. Great.
Great.
Nice to meet you.